Good evening and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this wonderful Tuesday night / evening, depending on what your time zone is, from wherever it is that you do join us around the world. It's a pleasure, great pleasure to be back. Thank you to all our new community members, those that have recently subscribed to the channel. May God bless you. May God bless you. Welcome to the community, and I hope you do enjoy your stay while you're here with us. Because Onya, hi LFC, good to see you back. How are you? How has been your day? How is everything going on for you there? How is everything? Let's chat it out. Let's chat it out. Let's chat it out. I know. Oh, meanwhile, I'm supposed to exit suddenly. Yeah? Pedri, hi Pedri, how are you? It was good. I had Salah P. You had Salah P. Player of the year. Okay, yeah, the PFA awards, those are being conducted, and I'm happy to see that in the PFA team of the year, I have majority of my own players that I did choose in that very same team. So Morgan Rogers, Young Player of the Year, congratulations to all the winners of the night. Yeah, Real Madrid up leading by goal to nil against Osasuna. I'm following that game as well. Kylian Mbappe from the Sport Kit to give Real Madrid the lead in that game. So I am following the events from there as well. Okay. Just trying to exit an account here. But anyways, we'll leave that at that. So tonight we'll be speaking about Eberechi Eze, who has agreed already. A deal in principle has been reached for him to join Tottenham Hotspur. We'll be speaking about the impasse between Newcastle and Alexander Isak. Amid strong interest from Liverpool, we'll be talking about that. We'll be speaking about Leandro Trossard's new contract, and yeah, everything within that realm. That's what we'll be discussing for the purposes of tonight's broadcast. So yeah, do join me on this discussion. Of course, there are some updates from the CHAN, from the African Nations Championships. Because Senegal and Sudan were engaged in a goalless draw. So, for those of you that are just joining us, good evening to you all. My name is Robert Kesakos, and I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. That's where we are streaming live from, and it's exactly 21 minutes past 11 p.m. Do let me know where you're joining us from down in the comment section. Let's engage. I'll be reading all your comments, but also do me that absolute honor and favor. Like the broadcast, but more importantly, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel and help us go to 2,000 subscribers. That's the objective for this month. Whether we'll even achieve it remains to be seen, but so far you've been a very good audience. We have so many new community members that continue to join every single day, so I hope you guys do the same. It's a football channel. It's a football updates channel, so if you're a football fan, grab the seats, grab your popcorn, grab your cup of coffee, grab your cup of tea, grab your latte, whatever it is that works for you, and join me on this channel as we discuss the latest from the world of football. Why do we kick things off? I think let's kick things off with small updates from the African Nations Championships. Senegal involved in a goalless draw with Sudan. I think Senegal finished that game with a manless following a red card in that game, while the other, Nigeria, managed to record a 2-0 victory against Congo. Yes, against Congo. But that victory did not really count for much, as they still bow out of the competition, having finished third in Group D. So yeah, Nigeria beat up against Congo. Congo also finished the game with the manless, having received a red card. Sudan and Senegal also finished, in a goalless draw, but Senegal completed that game with a manless following a red card. It was Anas Yusuf as well as Sikiru Alim that did score the goals for Nigeria in the 56th minute and in the 93rd minute, or the third minute of added time. So to make sure that Nigeria did not walk out of the tournament without a victory at least. So that means that Uganda will be up against Senegal, the reigning champions of the African Nations Championship, in the quarterfinals that will be played on Saturday at 8 p.m. at Nambole Stadium, while in the earlier game, I think Algeria will be up against Sudan, and that game will be played in Zanzibar. Then Tanzania will be at home against Morocco on Friday, while Kenya on the same day will be up at home against Madagascar. So if Kenya do go past Madagascar and Tanzania can knock out Morocco, then we could see an East African derby in the semi-finals. However, if let's say, yes, I think that's the setup. Then also, like I said, Algeria will be up against Morocco, and Sudan up against Senegal up against Uganda, and then Algeria will be up against Sudan in that order. So that's the quarterfinals of the competition. Yeah, I think so far so good because we have all the three hosts being in the quarterfinals, which is really good. Of course, South Africa must have felt hard done by following last night's result that ended in a 3-all draw that saw Uganda advance to the quarterfinals. But anyways, it is what it is. Quickly, we will move away from that, guys. I hope you're following the updates from that game between Osasuna and Real Madrid. Very entertaining first half, but the first half felt pretty much what it felt watching Arsenal versus Manchester United, with Manchester United being the better team while really failing to score, while Osasuna defended really well in the first half. That's what for me it really felt like. A couple of missed chances for Real Madrid in the opening half. Couple of balls hit wide of the mark, but it was only that, and it has taken a penalty, literally, or a set piece play, the way it did for Arsenal, for Real Madrid to get a goal in this particular game. So, I mean, we can draw some few similarities here and there. You say watch the game. Yeah, I'm following the game on my screen as we get to engage. And the reason as why I get to do this is because if I wait for the game to conclude for us to start our broadcast, that means we get to start the broadcast at midnight. And I'm also time conscious about majority of our usual suspects, because while they may be patient with me staying up at night to wait for this podcast, I'm also cognizant of the fact that sometimes they may not be able to do that. So, for example, for people in Spain, if it's midnight, here it's probably 11 p.m. If same applies for South Africa, if it's midnight, it's about 11 p.m. in the UK. I mean, you guys do dinner at 6, 7, and by that time, many people have gone to bed. Albeit there are some that are still awake. And then it's probably 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the USA. And you've seen for the couple of people that have joined us on some of our broadcasts. Anyways, that's sort of the background with which I come about when I insist to go at least to get the conversation started before the second half is concluded. And we're in about 65 minutes so far in the second half. But we will speak about the latest from the world of transfers as we also continue with updates from that particular game. So keep your eyes on that game for those of you that are managing to catch it while we continue with the conversation momentarily. Alexander Isak has spoken up for the first time since this summer or transfer saga has raged on, and I'm going to be reading that statement because, I mean, there's no better place to start, because part of our topic tonight is the impasse between Newcastle and Alexander Isak after he did request to explore his, options. And here's what his statement says. I'm proud to be recognized by my fellow professionals with a place in the PFA Premier League team of the season for 2024-2025. First and foremost, I want to thank my teammates and everyone at Newcastle United who has supported me along the way. I'm not at the ceremony tonight with everything going on. It didn't feel right to be there. I've kept quiet for a long time while others have spoken. The silence has allowed people to push their own version of events, even though they know it doesn't reflect what was really said and agreed behind closed doors. This the reality is that promises the reality is that promises were made, and the club has known my position for a long time. To now act as if the issues are only emerging is misleading. When promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now, change change is in the best interest of everyone, not just myself. That's the statement by Alexander Isak. And particularly, I want to pick out some of the key statements or the key phrases in this particular statement. He says that the reality is that promises were made, and the club has known my position for a long time. Now, this takes us back to that story that was done by the Athletic. No, was it? No, it wasn't by the Athletic. It was done by Craig Hope, I think, of the Mail. He's the one that probably brought us that story in which he wrote at great length about how the managerial changes within the realms of Newcastle had sort of caused a shift or a drive away from some of the promises that had been made to Alexander Isak at the time. And he talks about Chevely. I keep forgetting the other name that were, some of the managerial hierarchical people at Newcastle who had promised Alexander Isak a new contract, an improved contract, And now, when those two were pushed out and a new sporting director, I think Paul Mitchell came in with other team executives, they made the decision that because Alexander Isak still had 4 years left in his contract, there was no reason awarding him a new contract. And because of that, also they did stress the fact that the club were not in a good place when it came to the profit and sustainability rules. And they looked at that, said Alexander Isak is already one of the arguably the most best players or the best players at Newcastle. He could let him stay on that contract, and then we will review in the not so distant future. Now, it is at that point that Alexander Isak told the club that last season would be his last season at Newcastle, and again, that he told them probably a long time ago, and the club have known this. So their breakdown in relationship, and he talks about this by saying that promises were made and the club has known my position for a long time. That's what he relates to. Then also, he says to now act as if the issues are only emerging is misleading. Again, initially we were led to believe that he had only requested to explore his options this summer. That was after July, or somewhere along midway in July. And that's to the contrary. And I think that's what he speaks to. And he says that when promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship cannot continue. So you can see that there's an absolute break of trust between the club and the player. And this for me takes us back to the gentleman's argument that lay between champion Galatasaray Osimhen the best. Ahmed Bak says that's his comment. Hi Ahmed, good to have you on the podcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Give us an update. What's happening with Victor Osimhen and Galatasaray? Anyways, so like I was saying, when he talks about promises were made, hi from Turkey, okay, I figured just as much Turkey, or as people prefer to pronounce it, Turkey, So this Alexander Isak, situation takes me back to that that conversation we had for quite some time about Victor Gyökeres and Sporting CP. You remember Victor Gyökeres and his agent saying they had a gentleman's agreement. Now, part of the change to that or part of what caused the trouble was Sporting Lisbon had made changes within their sporting director. I think he left to join Manchester City. I stand to be corrected, but that's in part what I do remember. So because he had left, the people that were new in managing the relationship between the player and his agent and his representatives were not up to beat of what had been agreed upon in those realms, or if they were aware of what had been agreed upon, they were not in agreement all the terms in which that had been agreed upon, and that caused a bit of an impasse between the player and the club. And we saw the transfer saga that eventually culminated with Victor Gyökeres joining Arsenal this summer. It was sort of a prolonged battle, which also ended with the agent having to forego his commission for the transfer to happen. So in this particular case, Alexander Isak is trying to paint a similar kind of picture in the statement, saying that promises were made, and then he says when promises are broken and trust is lost, then the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now. Now, I understand all this, and I've said this about a gentleman's agreements. Gentleman's agreements are not enforceable. Okay, are hard to enforce because they are not written in dry ink. Basically, it's one promise. It's one promise from one party to another, and people are known for going against their own words. We know that history. Now, however, I must say this, that while that may have been the situation, even if it had been all season, that the player had already informed the club of his desire to leave after the end of last season. I said this in the morning, and I say it. Just because he asks to leave does not make it an obligation for Newcastle to let him go. That's from a professional perspective, because gentleman's agreements work at a level of a gentleman's understanding to say, I'm a man of my word to commit to this, and we will let it happen in that kind of direction. Now, unfortunately for Alexander Isak, or for any players who make those kinds of agreements, again, Yohan Wissa is the other prime example. The same situation. Apparently, when Ivan Toney left the club, when Ivan Toney left the club, he was made this promise that he would be allowed to leave the club for a fee of about £26 million. That's what we are getting. And the player, because Brentford have made it so hard for him to leave the club at this stage, he went to his social media, updated his bio, removed everything relating to Brentford, and put basically a black profile. Again, he's also in a way trying to signal his discontent with the club, that's Brentford, for what he deems to be a violation of a gentleman's agreement that they agreed to with the club. And club officials have been known to do these things, to go against their word. However, players continue to do these kinds of agreements with clubs. Now, the good thing for Yohan Wissa is that he's more or less, at least in 3/4% or 75%, he's remained professional. He's not refused to play, he's not refused to train, even though he has told the club he would want to go to Newcastle. That pretty much they know. Now, for Alexander Isak, yes, he may have informed the club that he wanted to leave at the end of last season, or that last season will be his last at Newcastle, but also he's under a binding contract that still has 3 years left to it. So for me, that's the basis. Now, while you resolve your impasse or your broken promises and lies that have been spread, or misinformation, as you call it, I believe it would have served not just his interest, but as well as that of the club and his professionalism, that he got to, to stay professional, train with the rest of the team, go on the tour, continue to play for as long as you're selected. You know, you may not play with the same enthusiasm while that is ongoing, but be there, be involved. You know, let nothing be held against you while you continue to remind or demand for what you think ought to be honored. But the mere fact that he decided to take a back foot to go in protest, however valid his reasons may be or are, for me, is just not right. It doesn't sit right. I mean, we are all adults. We've had the chance to work under contracts in our respective capacities, and we know how these, contracts can be legally binding and things of that nature. Really. So you do not just wake up and say, "I asked to leave, so you must let me go." So, like I said, Newcastle are not obligated whatsoever to let him go just because he asked to leave. Now, for all that has been reported, please bear in mind that we are operating under partial information in this particular case, because for long we've spoken basing on what has come out in the media in terms of what promises were made to the player, but also in regards to what Ed Howe has been speaking to the media. You know, that was our basis of all talk and analysis. And today we have a statement from the player himself, having not been at the ceremony of the PFA awards. Now, with that said, because you're under this binding contract, I think it would have served him best to say, okay, as I wait for this impasse to be resolved, ABCD should be happening. He should be pushing his agent, should be maybe, because how is it, man? How is it, tester of life? Good to have you on the broadcast. We are discussing the impasse that is between Newcastle and Alexander Isak. And Alexander Isak just put out a statement maybe about an hour or so ago, trying to sort of paint for us a little bit of a picture of what's actually going on. And my argument is that while he feels that all his reasons are valid for kind of taking the decisions he's taken, as a professional, I think he could have done much better. You see, what if Newcastle decide to play a lose-lose kind of situation? Because for as long as you are under Newcastle's contract and you're not being permitted to leave, then you're both losing. The club is losing. You as a player, you're losing because you cannot play for any other team until that situation is resolved. So if Newcastle decide that, okay, we're going to, stay on a high horse, see out the remainder of this transfer window, and then we wait for the season to resume when the transfer window is closed. Whether you continue to protest and not play, you'll be in the fringes. If you are willing to play again, then you will return and play for this season, and we'll let you go maybe in January or maybe next summer. Now, I'm sure that Liverpool's plan has always been to find a replacement for Alexander Isak, and they've tried that, although to little success, to actually no success at all, up until this stage. They tried bringing in Sesko, refused, Hugo Tike failed, João Pedro failed, they've been linked with the potential move for Nicholas Jackson. They've been linked with the potential move for Goncalo Ramos from Paris Saint-Germain. All these things that are ongoing. Isak is damaging his own reputation and football as a whole. Yes, I want to agree with you on that, because even for the desired club that you want to join, which you are trying to tell us at this one point that it is your dream club to join, what is it not to say that 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, when Barcelona, when Real Madrid, when Bayern Munich come calling, you're not going to behave in a similar fashion? You may have valid reasons, but as a professional, there's a point where you have to maybe handle things in a more diplomatic manner before everything goes AWOL. But like I said, we are all operating based on the information that has come henceforward until at this point. And I was okay judging him before I even had his side of the story, because I knew that even if there was a gentleman's agreement, just as such as has been alluded to, there is a level of professionalism below which you shouldn't be falling. You know, that he owed it to his teammates and his career to continue with the club, not because he was guaranteed that he's going to stay, but because it was the right thing to do. You know, again, in the morning, I gave you guys the example of Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney was on the verge of leaving Manchester United to join Manchester City. I think that was around either 2009, 2010, or 2011, because Cristiano Ronaldo, I think, lives in 2009, and it was around the same time that Manchester City were trying to sign Wayne Rooney, and he almost joined Manchester City. But while he had informed the club of his desire to leave at that point in time, he did not refuse to train. He did not protest. He did not, if he was ready in the lineup to play, he did play. And then guess what? A couple of weeks down the road, they sat with the club, reached an agreement. He renewed his contract. You know, he renewed his contract. So, and he stayed at Manchester United. And today we speak of Wayne Rooney as a club legend at Manchester United. Now, I'm sure had he made the move to Manchester City, perhaps that debate would have been a bit different, you know. So, you say that statement that was put out, was it his or the club itself? The statement that has just come out is Alexander Isak's statement, because he was speaking about his absence at the PFA Awards. Remember, the PFA Awards have been ongoing tonight, and he has missed that ceremony. So he came out to communicate that ceremony, why he has missed that ceremony, and then he gave us a bit of context on what's happening behind closed doors. So, but nonetheless, for me, I feel pre-season came, should have stayed with the group, continue to hammer it in the ears of his, of the club officials. I want to leave this summer. I've mentioned it. Please, this is what is going on. There's an offer from Liverpool. What's happening? I would want to join Liverpool. That's okay, but remain professional. Luis Diaz is another example that I did cite in the morning. For those of you that were part of the podcast, we spoke about this again, about the lack of professionalism. In my opinion, guys, it's a personal opinion, you know, so it's not a generalization of everything or how people should live their lives. But Luis Diaz, Barcelona came in for him. We would have loved to join Barcelona, but Liverpool said no to Barcelona. Bayern Munich came in. Liverpool said no to Bayern Munich. They went away, took some time, came back. You know, he told the club he wanted to leave this summer, Luis Diaz. And that was on the backdrop of earlier on telling the club, apparently, that he should be allowed to leave, or else they should entertain new contract talks with him. So when Bayern Munich came back in and made their first bid, which was about, I think, 67.5 million euros, which Liverpool turned down, he again reiterated to the club that he would wish to leave the club and join Bayern Munich. But he continued professionally. He trained, he played in that game against Stoke City behind closed doors. When they went away for their Asian tour, he still went with the club. It was up to the manager to reach him or not to reach him in starting 11 or even on the bench until he got his move, you know, until he got his move. But had Liverpool stuck to their guns and said, look, still under contract, you still have 2 years left on your current contract, you're staying, you're not leaving, I'm sure Luis Diaz would have stayed against his better fee, you know. And he wouldn't be the first player, by the way. Alexander Isak, even if he ends up staying and playing for Newcastle again, he wouldn't be the first player to play for a team that he doesn't love that much. He wouldn't be the first, that's for sure. You know, because in his perspective, which is not a wrong perspective, is that Newcastle were always going to be a stepping stone to something bigger. And if we are being honest, and I've said this before, without fear of contradiction whatsoever, that Liverpool is a much bigger team than Newcastle. Arsenal is a bigger team than Newcastle. Manchester United is a much bigger team than Newcastle. Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Chelsea are a bigger team than Newcastle. Manchester City are a bigger team than Newcastle. Forget how old you are and, that kind of thing. Forget all that. So there's always two sides to every story. That's true. That's true. There's always two sides to every story. And like I said, we've always operated under the information that has come out in the media on part of the player side, but also the club side. Now, the difference is that the club was the one continuously speaking, because Eddie Howe, on a weekly basis, was before the cameras, are being asked about this situation. What's happening with Alexander Isak? Is anything close? Have you resolved? Is there a possibility for him to be reintegrated? So he had to speak about it, really, So, and yet for Alexander Isak, while he may have the luxury of doing the same, they chose to keep quiet, and which was the right thing to do, because I do not think going back and forth between publications would have made the situation any better. So, but Liverpool do play Newcastle on Monday night. Again, Alexander Isak is not expected to be part of that. Liverpool remain interested in signing him. However, their first bid, which was worth £110 million, in my opinion, was way, way, way below what should ought to be paid for Alexander Isak in a transfer window that Liverpool just broke their own transfer record to sign Florian Wirtz. Now, if you have a midfielder, an attacking midfielder, going for £100 million plus a £16.5 million in expected add-ons, then Alexander Isak, surely, as a proven striker, perhaps arguably one of the best strikers that there is currently in Europe and in the Premier League, you must acknowledge that if the other one is worth that, then Alexander Isak is going to cost you not just a little more than that. So again, we've had the numerous reports pointing in the direction that Newcastle want at least a total package of about £150 million. Now, again, Alexander Isak must be aware of the fact that having interest in him from other clubs and meeting the valuation of Newcastle for him are two different things, because let's take the assumption that Newcastle were to open the door today and say, okay, we are willing to sell, but at this price. If that price is not met, and they stick to their cards, then still the transfer is not going to happen. It could be an impasse on the payment structure. Anything can happen to sort of fail a transfer to go through. You remember at some point on this channel, we were speaking about a proposed transfer for David De Gea Quintana to Real Madrid. I think this was about when? Was it 2012 or 2013 or 20? I do not remember exactly, but around that period. And we are hearing reports that the paperwork had been sent late, which was intentional. When a club puts a high price tag on a player, then they do not really want to sell them. Yes, they do not want to sell them, but if they are being forced to sell them, then it should be worthwhile for them. It should be worthwhile for them. Again, I've related this in simple terms that imagine yourself having a car or a house that you really like. Let's make it simple. A car. You're driving your maybe Golf. You're driving your BMW. I'm sure BMW and Golf are very, very common in South Africa. That's why I'm using those very examples, by the way. So you love that small saloon car of yours, that small hatchback, that whatever, you really love it. And then somebody who appreciates it, who thinks they love it more than you, comes along and says, look here, Testa, I want to buy your car. How much is it? And you're like, it's not for sale. I love my car way too much. Now, let's assume that the market value for that car is about, in whatever condition it may be, could be about 1 million rand, and you say it's not for sale. But if somebody is going to force you to sell, if they come with 2 million rand, then you may change your mind, because you're thinking to yourself, I can easily go back and buy another Golf, another BMW, and replace it with the money I get from that. So that's that. Or you yourself set the price at 2 million to try and disenfranchise this you potential buyer into looking at it like saying, "Oh, that's too expensive. It's not worth it." It's not worth the investment to try and fend off their interest. That could be the tactic. So usually, a high price is a tactic to fend off interest. But if that high price that you've set, eventually somebody is willing to meet it, then you're going to sell. But you'll be happy. You you'll be happy that you sold at a price that you thought was a premium price to console you for losing your prized assets that you really, really appreciated. So that's just how I look at it at the end of the day. You say, I'm driving an Opel Corsa. Oh, I could be reading that wrongly because, okay. Oh, you're driving an Opel Corsa. Okay. Now, you're not a fan of BMW and Volkswagen. Why? Why are you not a fan? Volkswagens are very, very good cars, very reliable cars. And by the way, anyway, all right. Maybe in our perspective, or mine in particular, the reason as to why is, for example, some of our people here locally do find some of those cars difficult is they are expensive to maintain. And the reason why they are expensive to maintain is one, the state of our roads, but also because we drive them as second-hand cars or sometimes even third-hand cars. So that becomes a bit of a challenge. So by the time you get it, the producing company is already thinking, nah, its warranty is already gone, and we will anything that happens to it at that point is expected. So and that kind of thing. So eventually they become a little too expensive to maintain. But basically, that's how I'll put it. BMW are too expensive to maintain. Yeah, they're too expensive to maintain. I know an acquaintance in this country who calls BMWs that they are always on the car carrier. They get 40. They're not very common, by the way, in Ugandan roads. You'll find a couple of them at the BMW X5, X3, X6, and then the other smaller BMWs that more look like the Mercedes-Benz C200 or compressor, something like that. That kind of version, but again, they're not very, very common. I don't know what are the most common brands of cars in South Africa, but in Uganda it's Toyotas, Subarus. Now Subarus are very dominating the market. You'll find Mercedes-Benz, you'll find Mitsubishi, but you'll find usually those ones in government vehicles and a couple of Nissans here and there, and a couple of other brands, the Kias of this world. But yeah, so the situation between Alexander Isak and Newcastle, unfortunately, is at that stage. So if he chooses not to return to the club and not to reintegrate, not to play for them again, and the club choose not to sell him this summer, then he will stay on the fringes. Now, the club will do that very well knowing that if they are taking that direction, then his value is going to go down. But also, it doesn't help the player. Remember, it's a World Cup year. Whether Sweden qualified for the World Cup or did qualify for the World Cup remains to be seen. But we all know what it means to players to be summoned to the national team to go and play at the FIFA World Cup. So we'll just have to wait it out and see. You say Volkswagen is Ford Ranger, Renault, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz are very common. Okay, Ford Ranger, Renault is a very, very good car, very fast car. But we also have a couple of those in Ghana, but again, they're not very, very common. Some of the brands that are here, especially if it's not a Toyota, it's not a Subaru, you'll find very few of them among private owners. You'll find those other brands predominantly, besides Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, and Subarus, you'll find them predominantly with companies, government agencies, and things like that. The Ford Rangers of this world, and the Mitsubishi L200, the Isuzu D-Max, and things like that. Do you guys have Bolt in Uganda? It was here, but I think formally they left the market. it was here at some point, but same thing happened to Uber. The kind of like, because they are digital apps, people can still use them, but they as companies or brands, trying to push their own brands locally, that's no longer really happening. It's no longer really happening. So we now have, because we have Safe Border, that's the brand, it's Safe Border / Safe Car. Uber, there's another called right now. It's a new one. There's another called Faras. Then in which other one? There's a couple of them. There's a couple of them around in that space. But yeah. Okay, quickly, guys. Let's move away from the impasse between Alexander Isak and Newcastle and turn our attention to the PFA Awards. The PFA Awards. Of course, Mo Salah was voted as the PFA Player of the Year. Morgan Rogers of Aston Villa was voted as the PFA Young Player of the Year. We also had the PFA Team of the Season, and that Team of the Season had a couple of names which I did put within my own, my own team for the Premier League Team of the Season, last season, and I'll be letting you know what that. You said there are more than 50,000 drivers of Bolt in South Africa. What? Wow. And but like, does Bolt own the vehicles, or those vehicles are owned by individuals that are doing the ride share as a job? Because for us, what is happening is that I buy a car and then decide to do ride share as a job, as a full-time job. And for me to be successful at it, I must operate it with different service providers or different middlemen. That means Uber right now, Paras, and all those other brands. And then in some cases, you have an individual, let's say testers of life, buys his car and then he gives it to me to drive it as a ride share, and then I make for them passive income. So for example, the argument could be that maybe on a weekly basis, you're going to be, let's say, reporting 200,000, shillings, which is 200,000 shillings is approximately about 75 US dollars, around that ballpark, So those are the kinds of models within which we do operate. Anyways, back to the PFA Awards, quickly. Then James Trafford was voted as the PFA Championship Player of the Year. Again, congratulations to him. No surprises for me. When it came to the Premier League Team of the Year, I'm trying to find that. Yes. Where is it? Yes, the PFA Premier League Team of the Year has players like. Meanwhile, the game between Real Madrid and Osasuna has just concluded. There, it has ended in a 1-0 victory for Xabi Alonso's Real Madrid. A penalty scored by Kylian Mbappe was enough to ensure that Real Madrid walked away with all 3 points in their opening game of the season. So, PFA Premier League Team of the Year is Matt Sells in goal. Now, where they have Matt Sells, most of the time, a driver registers his own car and he makes a fleet, with other cars. Then the owner of the car asks for about 2,001 from each driver per week. Okay, I get you. Essentially, the model is not too different from what is here, but because of the size of our economy, rideshare is only within the capital, or what we call the metropolitan region. Now, our metropolitan region, which is the Kampala metropolitan region, spans about 3 districts, and that's Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono. Those are the 3 districts. So, because our economy is so small, those are ride shares, apps and things do not spread to other, small towns and maybe major towns outside the capital or around the country. So I think that's one of our other challenges. So Anyways, back to the PFA, a premier team of the season. Martial is in goal. Virgil van Dijk, Milos Kakes, William Saliba, and Gabriel Magalhaes were the chosen back four. Declan Rice was in the midfield. Ryan Gravenberch as well, alongside Alexis McAllister, with a front three of Mo Salah, Alexander Isak, and Chris Wood. Now, in my PFA team of the year, I went with David Raya in goal. I went with the back three of Virgil van Dijk, Nikola Milinkovic of Nottingham Forest, and Milos Kakes. So at least there we have two commonalities in Virgil van Dijk and Milos Kakes. Then I went for a double pivot of Declan Rice and Bruno Fernandes. And then ahead of the double pivot, I chose another set of three players. That was Cole Palmer, Mo Salah, then Morgan Rogers. That's three. So that means I'm playing a 3-2-3-2 kind of system. Is it right? Because that's the other one is 5 plus 3 plus 2. Yes. And the front two was Alexander Isak and Chris Wood. So at least the same team, their team has Alexander Isak, I had him, Chris Wood was there, Mo Salah, Declan Rice, Virgil van Dijk, Milos Kakes. Yeah, at least 6 out of the 11 players that I chose have also made it to this one. Club Roots just beat Rangers 3-1. Okay, that's in the UEFA Champions League qualifiers. Pedri is back from watching that game between Real Madrid. I hope so. Pedri, are you disappointed? Are you impressed? What caught your attention in that Real Madrid team? Because for me, I felt the entire game felt a little, although the results ended up differently, but it felt like that game between Manchester United and Arsenal. Real Madrid played well, but they were struggling to score. They were struggling to score. They were struggling to create actually clear-cut chances, because all the chances they had, especially in the first half, were like, not even half chances, but semi-half chances, really. And again, they ended up, winning the game by penalty, similar fashion that Arsenal scored from a set piece to also win the 3 points. I thought Osasuna defended really, really well, so it just didn't look good. It just didn't look good. And if anything, Xabi Alonso must know that there is a lot of homework for him to go and do after that game in regards to how they apply themselves overall. When I look at some of the statistics, Real Madrid had 5 shots on target versus Osasuna 0. They had 7 shots off target. They had 6 blocked shots. So you can see 6 blocked shots and the 7 off target. I'm sure majority of those off targets came in the first half. Then you can see overall possession was 70-30. Again, they dominated the game, but oftentimes they did not look like they were about to score. That was the kind of game which they played. But anyways, 3 points is 3 points. They'll be glad that they've gotten the 3 points, and then they march on. Real Madrid could have done better. I think there is another Isak story happening there with Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo Goes. The issue with Vinicius Jr. has everything to do with his contract renewal. Those negotiations, I believe, are continuing between the club and Vinicius Jr. Then for Rodrigo Goes, it's for it, the case is a bit different in the context that the player would love to stay. The club wouldn't be hurt keeping him around, but if a good offer came, they wouldn't stop it. They wouldn't stop him from exiting. So it's that kind of bit of relationship or what's happening there with those 2 Brazilian internationals. But okay, we have now about 11 days left until the closure of the transfer window. Let's wait and see how things will be. I heard that he wants to leave Vini Jr. Not that he wants to leave. Okay, based on what I know is that Real Madrid are entertaining contract negotiations, renewal talks with him, and he's asked to be on similar wages, if not more, than Kylian Mbappe. Apparently, he wants up to 30 million euros per season, which Real Madrid think is too high. And I did say to myself, if that has any truth to it, if Real Madrid open that kind of worms, then when it's time to renew JD Bellingham's contract, it's going to be looking at that kind of ballpark. If 2 years down the road, Kylian Mbappe's contract is due for renewal, he's going to be looking to better that, and for how many times can he do it? So if Madrid dig themselves into that hole, it's one that will be really, really hard for them to get out of. However, I also did mention that Florentino Perez is a kind of owner or club president that is not afraid to cut off an arm to save a body. He's sold players before, well within their prime. Now, the difference in context is that during that time, Real Madrid had so many stars. Remember when he let go of Mesut Ozil to Arsenal in 2013? Mesut Ozil was practically in his prime, and Cristiano Ronaldo was very, very disappointed with the club. He went nuts for that transfer. Then a year later, they let go of Angel Di Maria and he joined Manchester United. He was well within his prime. Again, he did not rub Cristiano Ronaldo the right way, but Florentino Perez continued to make those decisions. So you remember when they let go Cristiano Ronaldo to join Juventus, nobody had expected that move to happen or saw that move coming. So if Vinicius Jr. and his representatives are choose to be stubborn, then he will have no trouble letting it go. And I'm sure Saudi Pro League clubs would be willing to open their arms to a player of Vinicius Jr.'s quality. In fact, as soon as those reports started to come out that Real Madrid were at an impasse with Vinicius Jr. over new contract, there was speculation that clubs in the Saudi Pro League were willing to pay up to 350 million euros to try and sign Vinicius Jr. So we can only wait, and time always tells what's good for the goods, and we'll wait to see. Then staying with, we're still looking at the PFA awards. Apologies. But Rodrigo, going on the bench, Rodrigo Goes being on the bench does not help his, kind of that kind of speculation. Testa says, I'm off for now. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Tribe and everyone else watching, I will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much, Testa, for being with us. I wish you the very best of a wonderful night and in your respective houses tomorrow. Stay blessed as well. So then Gareth Southgate was what did win the 2025 PFA Merit Award winner. There, of course, there are some, for the females. Then there's a very, very beautiful picture of, the sort of 11 of the season. Virgil van Dijk, very, very tall, of course, taller than, William Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Milos Kakes, Declan Rice, Mo Salah, Alexis McAllister, Ryan Gravenberch, Matt Sells. Now, Matt Sells had to fly in for this one because remember he made the transfer from. No. Sorry, I was confusing Matt Sells with Mark Flacken, the goalkeeper that left Brentford to join Bayer Leverkusen. And then, of course, Chris Wood is there. The only absentee here is Alexander Isak, and he's given his reasons for his absence tonight. So Mo Salah is winning this for the third time. So it must be really, really a good feeling for him. Then Arsenal's trio, again, Arsenal has had players consistently in this kind of team, and that's a good sign for them. Then Morgan Rogers, well deserved. I think he had 8 goals. No, he had 8 goals and 10 assists in the Premier League last season, in about 38 or 37 appearances. So congratulations to him and every single winner on the night. Of course, I don't know what has been voted as goal of the season. If they do, but yeah. Anyways, let's move away from that, and and go back to the world of transfers. Douglas Luiz is set to join Nottingham Forest from Juventus for a fee of about £25 million. Deal is being driven by Edu Gaspar Dawood. And remember, Arsenal tried to sign Douglas Luiz while Edu Gaspar Dawood was still the sporting director at Arsenal. So for me, this is not a very huge surprise. Then also, Leandro Trossard has agreed to a new contract with Arsenal. Now, this new contract is not a contract extension as revealed by Ghana blog of The Athletic. It's a revised contract, so he will stay on the same period with his contract running until the summer of 2027. But his wages have been revised to sort of meet his contribution to the team. Really, so it was put out by Ben Jacobs that Leandro Trossard had agreed improved terms at Arsenal, but remains contracted until the summer of 2027. Initial approaches this summer from Brentford and Dortmund, but Trossard still valid by Arsenal, who stuck to a high valuation. Decision now taken to reward the 30-year-old Belgian international. Then also, as it stands, Rodrigo Muniz is set to stay. Rodrigo Muniz is set to stay at Fulham despite a £35 million bid from Atlanta. Exit won't be sanctioned without a replacement. Fulham have internally discussed bringing back Alexander Mitrovic. No approach, and unless the player and Al Hilal agree a contract termination, first Mitrovic's wages is a stumbling block on a loan. Fulham were never interested in Rasmus Højlund. That has also been clarified. Then, okay, of course, there's too much. Then also, RB Leipzig are keen on resigning Christopher Nkunku from Chelsea on a permanent deal. Bayern pushed over the weekend to try and finalize a loan move, but Chelsea made it clear that any formula must. They are looking for permanent exit. They are not looking for, any loan deal whatsoever. Then Marseille have listed Adrien Rabiot and Jonathan Roy. Marseille have transfer listed Adrien Rabiot and Jonathan Roy due to unacceptable behavior in the dressing room after the match against Stade Rennes. So, I mean, that's new. Not very often you hear players being quickly punished by that. But anyways, let's wait and see. So, Christopher Nkunku, I mean, this proposed move to RB Leipzig will facilitate that switch for Xavi Simons. That's what I believe. So, then Alejandro Garnacho be turned down an approach from Bayern Munich because his preferred destination remains Chelsea, and Chelsea are advancing in talks with Manchester United over a potential deal for the 21-year-old Argentine forward. Manchester United are insisting on the £50 million asking fee, citing non-Madueke's 48 plus £4 million move to Arsenal as the valuation yardstick. So we'll wait and see. Then also a fee has been agreed for Eberechi Eze to go to Tottenham for about £55 million as guaranteed fees plus £5 million as expected add-ons after discussions between Daniel Levy and Steve Parish, the chairman of Crystal Palace there. So they are finalizing a couple of last details to make sure that deal is also wrapped up. What else? What else have we not discussed? We discussed Isak, Trossard, Eberechi Eze. Now, Arsenal won't be making a move for Eberechi Eze. As much as Arsenal fans, I would have loved to see him in the red and white, colors. It's not going to happen. He's training their rivals in Tottenham Hotspur. That's a decision that has been made by the club because Arsenal's interest in Eberechi Eze was dependent on the potential departure of Ethan Nwaneri, and ever since he renewed his contract, since they view him as a backup for Martin Odegaard, they think that signing the number 10 is not the most urgent issue, but remain in the market for a left winger. So that's why the rumors around Rodrigo Goes are not going to go out away anytime soon. Then with Alexander Isak, of course, only wants Liverpool. We've spoken about that. Then quickly, what else? What else? Anyways, let's go into the latest from the world of speculation and transfer gossip quickly as compiled by BBC Sport before we sign out, because it's already been 1 hour into tonight's podcast. Okay. Jesus Christ. Okay. Aston Villa are exploring the viability of a move to sign Nicholas Jackson with his price tag. Sorry, from Chelsea, but the asking price needs to be lowered from £60 million due to the West Midlands club's financial restrictions. Bayern Munich's move for French forward Christopher Nkunku has stalled, delaying Chelsea's attempt to sign RB Leipzig's 22-year-old Dutch midfielder Xavi Simons. That's according to The Guardian. Chelsea are set to increase their efforts to sign Alejandro Garnacho. We've spoken about that. Newcastle are unwilling to pay more than £40 million for striker Yohan Wissa from Brentford, with the Bees believed to be asking for £68 million. According to the Northern Echo, I said no club in their sane mind should be paying £60 million for Yohan Wissa. Not at all. Then Wolves striker Jørgen Strand Larsen remains of interest to Newcastle, although the 25-year-old Norwegian is not hankering to leave Molyneux. That's according to the Athletic. Tottenham have targeted Monaco's £47.5 million rated French attacking midfielder Magnez, 23, as a cheaper alternative to Brazilian winger Savinho if Manchester City are demanding £70 million for the 21-year-old. That's according to the Independent. While Crystal Palace want 19-year-old Southampton winger Tyler Dibling to replace fellow Englishman Eberechi Eze, whose move to Tottenham is edging closer. Now, I do not see a world where Crystal Palace can afford Tyler Dibling, because Everton tried with 3 bids and they were all turned down, with Southampton demanding up to £50 million. Then also, a Brazilian midfielder Douglas Luiz is set to join Nottingham Forest. This we've spoken about after first owner Evangelos Marinakis brokered a deal with the Turin club general manager Damian Comoli. That's according to Tutto Sport in Italy. The Leeds are poised to sign 25-year-old Switzerland striker Noah Okafor from AC Milan, that we spoke about in the morning, for about €21 million. While Wolves and West Ham United are both interested in Spanish midfielder Marc Casado, but first a tough ask persuading the 21-year-old to leave Barcelona. That's according to Marca in Spain. West Ham are close to finalizing a deal which will allow a 27-year-old Mexican midfielder Edson Alvarez to join Fenerbahce on loan. That's according to TalkSport. While Espanyol are in talks with Burnley over resigning 20-year-old Italian under-21 forward Luca Coleisho on a season-long loan. Brazilian forward Rodrigo Muniz move from Fulham to Atalanta is off after the Cottagers rejected a proposed $35 million bid for the 24-year-old from the Serie A club. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Testa of Life. Thank you so much, LFC, and every single one of you. Thank you so much, Ahmed, and every single one of you that joined tonight's podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to those that like the podcast. Thank you to those that spare time to be with us every single night. We do appreciate you a great deal. To our new community members, those that watch our podcast long after they've ended, we do appreciate you a great deal. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye-bye for now.